School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Case Western. And I want to welcome you to the show and tell you this one we're deviating a little bit from our regular programming and talking with admissions people. Today we're going to talk about financial aid, in particular, how to pay for medical school. At the time I'm recording this, it's mid-February, and I find that February is one of those months that seems to have a lot of those awareness themes. For example, February is National Cancer Prevention Month and American Heart Month and the Go Red for Women campaign. It's also Black History Month, National Children's Dental Health Month, Library Lovers Month, National Bird Feeding Month, and one of my favorites, National Hot Breakfast Month. You gotta start the day off right? Anyway, little known fact is that it is also National Financial Aid Awareness Month. So, to add to the myriad of national celebrations going on this month, I've asked two of my friends in financial aid to come on the show to discuss financial aid related topics, primarily discussing how you pay for medical school. We also discuss topics such as needs-based aid and loans and scholarships and the importance of financial literacy and budgeting that you can do now. You don't have to wait till you're a med student, but we spend a lot of time in the beginning kind of breaking down what the terms cost of attendance means and why it's an important component of this process. So let me tell you about the people you're going to be hearing from today. Christine McDonough is in her 10th year as the Director of Student Financial Services at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. She recently completed a 3-year term as the Central Region Representative on the Committee on Student Financial Assistance through the AAMC's Group on Student Affairs. Christine draws from her personal interactions with medical students and residents to advocate for scholarship funding and student loan repayment support at the state and national level. She has a long record of working with legislators and industry leaders to champion educational funding initiatives for medical students and physicians. She's represented Ohio medical schools on the Ohio Patient-Centered Primary Care Collaborative Work Group. She chaired the Ohio State University Financial Wellness Task Force Graduate Professional Committee, and she represented the medicine financial aid community on the AAMC's ad hoc working group on admissions tools and resources. Throughout the public discussion of the 2018 Promoting Real Opportunity, Success, and Prosperity Through Education Reform Act, also known as PROSPER Act, she was invited to speak on the proposed legislation to the Interprofessional Student Council of Senators, as well as U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown's office in Washington, D.C. Christine earned her bachelor's degrees in linguistics and economics from Ohio State University and her master's in business administration from Capital University. She has over 20 years of admissions and financial aid experience working with graduate and professional students in medicine, law, and the sciences. She lives in Powell, Ohio with her husband of 15 years and her 3 young daughters. Mike Sabara is the other person you're going to be hearing from today. He's the Director of Financial Services at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine, and he's a Philly guy through and through. He graduated with a bachelor's in communication and public relations in 2007 from LaSalle University and worked in their admissions office as a tour guide. After graduation, he worked for 6 years for Holy Family University's admissions office as a counselor and assistant director of admissions. He received a master's degree in education from Holy Family University in 2012. He joined Perelman's academic programs office in 2013 and became director of financial services in October of 2019. Mike, his wife Courtney, and 1-year-old daughter Monica live in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia. If you have questions for either Mike or Christine, you'll find their email addresses in the show notes, so feel free to reach out to them. So with that, let's get after it. I hope you're ready. Enjoy. Hello, Columbus. Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for being a part of the conversation today. It's great to have you.
Oh, thank you, Christian. I'm so excited to be here, and I think it's a great topic, so I'm looking forward to the discussion.
And Philadelphia, are you out there, my boy Mike? What's going on?
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm really grateful. You and I talked about this a few months ago. We're like, we got to do this in February. And
absolutely,
I said, let's pick a time when you guys are at your busiest. So let's do February.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because this is financial aid season, and this is when the financial aid offices really start to ramp up. So I know your time is valuable. So I think everybody listening to this is going to be grateful for the time, because we have a lot of information to talk about and really important stuff about financial aid and how do you pay for medical school is kind of the main theme. And so before I go in, you and I start our conversation, I thought it'd be a good idea. I'm going to give some kind of high level statistics about medical school debt. And then we can go into some of the details of what that looks like as a cost of attendance and some of the things you and we all talked about prior to coming onto this call. So just a high level look at the national statistics on debt for students that graduated in 2019. This is for medical students that graduated in 2019. 73% had educational debt for medical school, with the average level of debt being $201,000. And that's for public and private, by the way. And if you look at the educational debt, including pre-med debt, 84% of those 2019 graduates had $100,000 or more of debt. 54% had $200,000 or more of debt, and 18% had $300,000 or more of debt. So that's kind of sobering, huh? So let's start talking about then. Let's just kind of be open. And what's our tuition? What's your cost of attendance, just for transparency? Christine, do you want to kind of tell us what is that at Ohio State?
Sure. So just to kind of start out, and listeners may already know this, but in general, medical schools and schools in general fall into two general categories. So you have private schools and you have public schools. So the difference to know there as far as how to approach the financing, public schools in general do get some financial support from their states. So what that means is that tuition tends to be lower at a public school than at a private school. So private schools, the tuition is the same for everybody. So you don't have some students trying to gain in-state tuition and things like that. So Kristen, I love that you have both types of schools represented in the discussion today, because they are different. There are things to know. And you're going to probably hear me say this a lot today. There's no right or wrong. It's not my school does it right and yours does it wrong, or this school's good for you or that one's bad. It's just different. So I expect that folks listening to the podcast are kind of at this point in the information gathering phase. So right. My goal is to really explain some of the terminology, what to expect, and then certainly share the numbers specific to Ohio State. So awesome. With that, I'll just tell you, for Ohio residents, tuition is about $15,000 per semester. So our MD program is 10 semesters long, which students complete over the course of 4 years. So tuition-wise for a resident, you're looking at about $150,000 over the 4 years. So for non-resident students, per semester, there would be about an additional $11,000 to $12,000 for the non-resident surcharge. Now, here in Ohio, students can apply for in-state tuition after 1 year. Most students do successfully get through that program, so we have virtually zero students who are still out-of-state non-residents by the time they're into their second, third, or fourth year. So theoretically, it could happen. It's just very, very rare. So, but what I want people to understand is this is just one approach. This is just how my state does it. There's no overarching rule as far as how states have to develop or apply their rules. So any public school that you're thinking of possibly enrolling at, you want to really seek out what that residency process looks like. That would be my best advice. So our cost of attendance for the preclinical years, for the Med 1 and 2 years, is going to be between about $55,000 and $60,000 per year. For the 3rd and 4th years, once you're into that year-round enrollment and you're into the clinical portion of the curriculum, the cost of attendance for an in-state student is about $80,000 per year. And then those non-resident fees, certainly add those on top if you were, for whatever reason, thinking you'd still be out of state that far into the curriculum.
Okay, cool. Mike, what about University of Pennsylvania?
So on the private school side of things, they are expensive. And all the private schools throughout the country, we have a set tuition that everyone is required to pay regardless of their state residence. Even Pennsylvania residents, should they be a resident of Pennsylvania, they are still charged the same tuition that a student from California would be charged. So for Penn and for the Perelman School of Medicine, the tuition right now for the 1920 academic year is $59,910. We also have a few fees that are required of students each year. A little, probably over $5,000 in fees each year. So the tuition and fees for this academic year was $65,343. Cost of attendance includes educational expenses like your books, equipment, health insurance, so transportation cost, living expenses like rent and food, utilities, another travel allowance for you to get to and from school. 99% of our students here at Penn live in the city of Philadelphia, live very close to the university and the hospital. So very little, if any, of our students own a car. At least if they do, it's back home at mom and dad's, but they don't have cars here. So a lot of our students are walking, riding their bike, etc. So that's all part of the living expenses. Our total cost of attendance, again, is based on how many months of enrollment. For first-year students here at Penn, it's a 10-month curriculum. Therefore, our cost of attendance includes 10 months of living expenses. And that number right now is $91,759, which does seem expensive, yes, but the cost of attendance is really there for students who are borrowing, and if they need that eligibility for loans, which I'm sure is a topic we're going to get to later on. Yeah. But it's really embedded into the cost of attendance because we want to make sure that anybody attending medical school can borrow loans if they need to in order to cover a lot of those educational and living expenses. Mm-hmm. So no matter where you go, it's important to look at not only what the tuition and the fees may be at a school, whether it be public or private, but also make sure you're asking questions about the cost of attendance. Mm-hmm. And because it all is considered when you're looking at debt and loan eligibility.
Okay, we're going to come back to that in a little bit of detail. And then I'll just tell listeners, as far as Case Western goes, we're similar as Penn. We're a private institution, and our tuition is around the same ballpark for our tuition and fees for our entering class of 2020. It'll be $65,476, mm-hmm. and with a cost of attendance of $92,012. So very close to Penn's. And Mike kind of went into what cost of attendance means. And that's like, if you guys wouldn't mind, it's kind of bundling all those additional expenses on top of what you're paying for school. And so, Christine, why is cost of attendance important to look at?
So cost of attendance is a very helpful tool, especially for students who have not settled on where they're going to enroll and they're kind of weighing their options. So cost of attendance is so helpful because it's on the school to come up with a reasonable estimate for what a student should expect to pay in a given year in that school's program. So when I talk to students who come here to interview, I tell them, I'm going to make the assumption that you're applying and strongly considering at least one school that's located in a city you've never lived in before. So I urge you to look at cost of attendance, because all the guesswork as far as what you should expect to pay for cost of living in that city, all of that is taken out of the equation for you. It's all done for you. You don't have to track this down on your own. So as far as planning, it is just such an important tool that students have in their toolbox when they're narrowing down their options. And to give you kind of an example, here in the city of Columbus, we're a relatively low cost of living city. Someone can get a clean, safe, comfortable apartment for $1,000 a month easily. Now that same student, if they were looking for $1,000 a month in housing in Philadelphia, for example, their options might be very different. So it's something that you need to know, not just from a financial planning perspective, but also safety, right? Because you want to be thinking about, can I get safe, affordable housing at this rate that I'm used to in the city that I already know, if I'm looking at a city where I've never lived and I don't know. So that's why cost of attendance just could not be more timely and helpful to students in this phase.
I want to mention too that a couple things when we were mentioning tuition and fees and cost of attendance. For the first thing, tuition and fees, you can't shoot the messengers in the financial aid offices. We don't set those.
No,
we don't set those tuition and fees. That usually comes from the university and the board of trustees, and they decide and approve what tuition and fees will be for the next academic year. It's just then sent to the financial aid offices and said, "This is what it's going to be next year."
Right.
So, I mean, I want to put that out there as kind of bulletproof our financial aid people a little bit. Like, this is not something that we set. Then, if you want to explain the cost of attendance again, it's kind of, help me out here, Mike, maybe. It's a budget that's set up by the financial aid office to kind of say, we've like, so here, for instance, the case, we survey our students and say, how much are you spending in paying for monthly rent? How much are you spending on food? How much are you, so I think, do you guys do the same thing? And then that's how you build your cost of attendance budget?
Yes. And it's I always let people know that when the cost of attendance, that's not what you're going to be charged on a bill. When you get the bill for the fall semester, like for example, you're only, at least here at Penn, you're only charged the tuition and fees. In some cases where if you do need health insurance will be charged on the bill. But all of our students here, they live in apartments that are not owned by the university. So they're not paying room and board, probably like how a lot of our listeners are used to paying for housing, where that's kind of bundled in with the tuition and fees. When you're in medical school, odds are you're just going to be charged the tuition and fees. So that's what the bill will reflect. All those other line items and living expenses, that's something that ultimately you're doing your homework on your end. How much do I really spend each month on food? And I would hope it'd be a pretty simple calculation of how much groceries would be. Let's say you're going out to dinner or lunch maybe a couple times a week, to kind of add up all those expenses, to think, okay, how much am I realistically going to be spending a month on food? But you're right, Christian. We meet with our students and we interview them, and we don't interview them, but we're meeting with them to get a sense of how much are you spending? How much are you spending on the books that you're either renting or you're buying them? If you're a student at Penn, during orientation, we're going to hand you an iPad. So how many of the books are you really buying? If you're not buying that many or renting that many, we're going to try to lower your cost of attendance because we don't want people borrowing any more money than they really need. Mm-hmm. And we do a lot of homework on our end to make sure that we're giving you a comfortable cost of attendance in terms of housing, but not something that's overinflated that you're just going to borrow the max and then it's going to come up later that you have a lot of extra debt that you really didn't need to borrow. So we try to really make sure that we have an appropriate line item and kind of allowance for each of our living expenses.
Yeah, great. That's a great description. Christine, do you have anything to add to that?
So here at Ohio State, we're quite large as an institution beyond just the College of Medicine. So the specific living components of the cost of attendance, our main university financial aid office surveys students. So my students are assigned the cost of living allowance for a graduate professional student because, of course, if you're in law school or pharmacy school, that doesn't really matter as far as what you should expect to pay in rent. Mm-hmm. So that part, yes, we do survey. Thankfully, I don't have to do it single-handedly. That is streamlined and the graduate and professional programs come together. We don't look at how the undergrads answer that question because they live on campus a lot of times and things like that. We do not have on-campus housing for graduate professional students with a few very specific exceptions. So we too, we're looking at having our students paying rent to a private landlord. So same idea as Penn. We're coming up with these reasonable estimates to provide adequate funding, but not excessive funding, because we certainly have the same concerns that Mike shared. We don't want students over borrowing more than what they would reasonably need. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this question. I think people have asked before. Can I borrow, if I'm a borrower and I'm borrowing the max amount, and if it's $95,000 is the cost of attendance at Penn. I forgot the number. I didn't write down, but let's say
you're close. It's a little under that.
Okay, so let's say
I'll keep it close.
Okay, so keep me at $95,000 and say, hey, I need to borrow more than that. Am I able to do that?
So there is a process for that. You can submit, at least here, what's called an increase. It's a budget increase, and typically you need some sort of documentation as to why you would be borrowing more than that. And it can be approved or denied. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. We really try to get in front of any situation where someone feels like they're borrowing where they need to borrow more. We're definitely going to ask some questions as to why. Why are you borrowing more? Where are you living? What is your rent? We don't want anyone living in a penthouse while they're a student. You can live in a penthouse after graduation, maybe when you're an attending. That could be the penthouse time. But we always reference to, as a student, you should be living like a student. You don't need a lot of the frills that a penthouse apartment, that comes with it. But ultimately, there is a process where you would have to submit an increase in documentation as to why you need to borrow more. We do not see that a lot, which is good. That, in a sense, tells me that the budget is appropriate. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. If a student out there is considering submitting a budget increase, if your school allows that, hopefully you can have a conversation with whomever your financial aid administrator is to really go over your budget, your own personal budget. Maybe you're spending too much on food. Are you buying a cup of coffee from Starbucks every day? You don't have that in the budget. We would rather you make your coffee at home, and everyone would, of course, say that. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But having those conversations early and often with the financial aid office is really critical, so that starting really good habits as a first year are only going to be able to carry forward second, third, fourth year when you're in the clinics and you're working odd hours. If you're setting the standard when you come in as a first year and really get yourself in a routine or a habit of what your spending is, you won't have to submit an increase. And hopefully borrowing less than what you're even eligible for.
Yeah. That we're going to get to some of the things that students can do now is kind of start to practice to get into that mode. Christine, do you have anything to add to that about as far as like if somebody comes to you and says, I think I've maxed out, but I need more money. Is that, does that happen? Is it common?
It does happen. I'm happy to say it's not terribly common. And one thing I would like to add to what Mike explained, he mentioned that sometimes these requests are approved, sometimes they're denied. And I think an important thing for students to understand is that the financial aid officer does have some legal limitations as far as what we can approve. So to give you an example, I had just a heartbreaking situation with a young man whose mother was very sick and she was just drowning in these medical bills. And he came to me to see if he could do a cost of attendance increase to help her out. Well, I knew he was telling the truth. I knew he could document what was going on, but there was no way I could approve that because the costs were not his. So the financial aid officer still absolutely reach out to that person, absolutely go see them, but they are going to have some limitations that go beyond just their personal discretion. So thankfully, situations like that are far less common. Sometimes I have students who receive their refund at the beginning of the semester and through their own admission did not budget as carefully as they should have, and they're running out of money, 60 or 90 days before they really should be. So those conversations, we would sit down. It sounds like my approach is very similar to what Mike does at Penn. I ask them a lot of questions. We look through their budget. I'm a stickler for making my students have a written budget. I think that's very telling, and not just for medical students, not just for students, anybody. My husband and I sit down and do our written budget and, fine tune it as you go, because it's very telling. It shows you exactly where your money's going. And it really puts that right in your face as far as, okay, do I really need to be spending this much on this discretionary line item? So the message to pre-meds or to current students, if you have financial difficulty, absolutely go see your financial aid office. They will help you through it. They will offer resources and support, though they are going to be constrained by some federal guidelines as far as what we can do with respect to the cost of attendance.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the some of the regulations that financial aid officers have to work within. It's not just opening up a checkbook and going, okay, here, we'll give you a little bit more. It's not as, it's more complicated than that. Okay, Kristen, I just have to make a confession. My discretionary line item that I get yelled at home about, not yelled at, but just like, is Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, I get sucked into some Amazon.
The A word.
It's free shipping, though. I mean, we're leaving money on the table. I'm getting prime rates, baby.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm guilty of that from time to time too. So but you make a great point. When you sit down and look at your budget, you can see like, guilty. I need to go back and change my behavior next month and not tap into Amazon goodies. So,
if I can
go ahead,
add
Mike.
one more thing.
Yeah.
Well, because our budget is ultimately based on if you're living by yourself. I think we had to have done that just in case we have a student who says, I want to live by myself. Our population is older. Average age of our enrolled student, I think, is about 24. So we're not requiring that anyone has roommates. However, we encourage it. I think it's wonderful to have roommates who are also in medical school at the same school, hopefully, but you never know. Having roommates are going to cut down on these costs tremendously, especially now. I mean, everyone's got a Netflix account, an Amazon account. So your roommates should all get together. Okay, who wants to pay for Netflix? And then everyone else should cancel theirs and just have the one for the house.
Yeah.
I'm sure Netflix doesn't like me saying that, but
whatever. Hey, what about budgeting?
Right. We're trying to save people money. Having all of these costs, think of them as cut in half or cut into a third, because you're going to be splitting utilities, splitting rent. And I think having that support system outside of school and having a community and a network, and hopefully your roommates are kind of going through the same ups and downs that every medical student is on. So they're going to be a great resource too, and will ultimately make rent a lot cheaper.
This is a great segue into what we wanted to talk about planning. Like, how do you start to plan to pay for med school? I think if people are listening and they might be thinking, I can't afford it. Hopefully what they've just heard in the last 15 minutes or so is medical schools build this cost of attendance as a budget to kind of say, this is what it's going to cost. And with loans, which what we'll get into a little bit, if you need to take out loans, you can take out the maximum amount of cost of attendance in loans, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So technically, you can afford to go to medical school. You're going to have to take out a lot of loans, which isn't uncommon. We went through the debt levels, the national debt levels. Right. So, but that's just to kind of, I think I want people to hear that you can afford it. It will come with loans, but we'll get to what that looks like down the road. I want to get into the planning phase of this. So, Christine, when we were talking before and kind of planning this conversation, we were saying you got to get the fundamentals in place. And you were talking about that a minute ago with how you and your husband sit down, budgeting. You had a great Dr. Phil quote. I don't remember what it was, but what's your Dr. Phil quote?
Yeah, so Dr. Phil says when it comes to, because money causes conflict in relationships all the time. So sometimes people come to Dr. Phil with these relationship conflicts, but what really is going on is money. And he says you don't solve financial problems with more money. And the reason why I go to that quote so often is because my population of medical students, and I put pre-meds in this category as well, you might not have an income right now. You probably have not, you probably don't have much in the way of stocks and bonds and real estate and all of that, but that is going to change, I promise you. So the behaviors that you have now when you don't have a lot of money are still going to be the same behaviors you have when you make a great deal of money. So I bring in a speaker to talk to my students about retirement, and he's a financial planner specifically for physicians. And he says, with my clients, they make a lot of money, but they just now fight over bigger ticket items. And it kind of comes full circle to what Dr. Phil says. That's really true. And that's why people like me and you, Kristen, and you, Mike, care so much about this, because if we can help empower our students to really get those fundamental skills down pat while they're a student and before they really step into that much higher paying role in their life, they're going to be just fine when they go from making maybe $60,000 a year as a resident to maybe $70,000 as a fellow, and then $500,000 thereafter, because the baseline foundational skills need to be there. So shout out to Dr. Phil. He really summed it up with that one quote.
Mike, when we're talking about budgeting, what are some of those basic, when you sit down with a student, Mike, that says, hey, I've never budgeted before. What do I do? How do you get them off on the right foot? I mean, because budgeting can look like a big deal. Like now I'm having to, do I need to jot down every single expenditure? Or can I look kind of big picture and then work my way down to the granular things later on?
Well, it's I'm a granular. I think I'm a granular thinker myself, and I would get to think of your day. Think of when you wake up in the morning. What are you eating? What are you drinking? I know it's going to sound crazy, but you have to take it at least to get a sense of what you think you pay on an hour. What do you think you pay? What do you think you're spending in a day? And just kind of make mental notes of what are you buying for lunch? How do you get your coffee in the morning? Little things like that. And I think once you start to get a sense of, okay, this is how much I spend a day on food, times that by 7, this is how much I'm spending a week. And then you kind of can build up from there. But I think I'm in the approach of you got to get granular first, and then you can expand it over a week or a month that may be able to help you. Now, some things are going to be a fixed amount where you're paying your cell phone each month. Maybe
your rent. If
you have your rent, your car insurance, stuff like that. If you need a car, but you have to. I think it's better to write them down. And you have to write them down. You got to take it step by step, and you got to break it down into certain categories like living expenses or educational expenses. What are your variable? What's your variable expenses like entertainment? What does that mean to you? If music is entertainment, and you were going to a lot of shows before medical school, you probably, unfortunately, have to cut back on the amount of live entertainment that you may be going to, because we're not necessarily putting that in the budget. We do have miscellaneous costs, but during this moment of time, really an investment in yourself over the next 4 or 5 years. Think of it as really an investment in your future. So because you're still going to be able to do all the things you want to do, they just not be in terms of the priority of that set luxury item or things that you want to do. They may not be as high on the list that they used to be. So really consider what is entertainment in your eyes. Miscellaneous, it may be listed as in a budget line item, and kind of get a sense of how much am I spending on these items. But
I think it's important to kind of see then what you're saying is that you have to budget and really get kind of granular. And I'll put a link to a sample budget sheet in the show notes so people can see in it that really goes into all the different details of where you can have expenses, and then how this lines up with this cost of attendance thing we're talking about. Because I think most financial aid offices will tell you, like, we've budgeted in cost of attendance for, let's say, $300 a month in groceries. And then as you look at your budget, or 300, you can say, like, you can break down the cost of attendance and see how much they've budgeted out per month, and then say, okay, well, the school's saying if I'm borrowing the max amount, they're budgeting for me to have $300 a month in groceries. I should try to stay in line with that or be under it.
Of course.
Or then you can kind of shift things around a little bit. If your rent isn't as high as what they're budgeting, then you can have some wiggle room. But you wouldn't know that stuff until you sat down and did this exercise in doing this basic budgeting.
I'm not going to lie. It's not going to be fun,
no.
but the payoff in the long run is really going to be tremendous, because I've had cases where students are borrowing the max every year because it's easier.
Yeah.
You borrow the max, and then you just kind of have a lump sum of money that could very well be linked to a debit or a checking account that you have, and you'll get, once the tuition and fees are paid, any dollar amount over that is going to be refunded. At least here at Penn, that's how it works. It's refunded directly to the students. So there could be some semesters where you have 10, 15 or more $1,000 getting handed over to you into a bank account.
It looks great.
We just say, hey, you have this. to budget. Now, I recommend this. Now, this is kind of a side note. As soon as you get money, I recommend moving most of it into another savings account, and then every week or every month, you give yourself a little bit of money each time. I think having a big lump sum of money in front is not a good idea. I don't know how you all feel about that, but once you get a refund, I recommend moving most of that into a savings account linked to the debit account so it can be easily transferred in and out when you need more money. Or if you don't need money, to remove it from your checking. That way it's not there, technically not there for you to spend.
Christine, what are your tips for students getting started off on budgeting?
So I think Mike's suggestion is a great one about putting pencil to paper. I think that is the best starting point. And really taking a look at where your money's going. And I tell my students too, it's okay to have your thing, right? So my thing is buying a fancy, delicious cup of coffee at the cafe maybe once a week. So that can be my thing. I just can't afford to have 10 things, let's say. I can't do that and get my nails done once a month and, buy a new pair of shoes once a month and that thing. So I'm not saying you have to live this life that is so deprived and so structured that you have absolutely no fun money. That's not my message at all, because it's too strict and it sets you up to fail. So if your thing is, I find it very relaxing to go to a movie on the weekends, that is totally okay. We know that. Let's budget for it. So yes, there's going to be some trade-offs, but it kind of reminds me of, on New Year's Day when people declare their, exercising and weight loss goals. Sometimes they are so ridiculously aspirational that you think there is no way in heck that you're going to succeed. It's not something you'd say to anyone or you wouldn't have any friends. But if on January 1st I say I'm going to lose 50 pounds by February 1st, you would look at me and, okay, good luck with that. Let me know how it goes.
Wish you the best.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing with budgeting. I'm very much about, okay, medical school is stressful. You have to have your release. You have to do something that you do for yourself, simply for your emotional well-being, for the sake of your relationships, whatever that variable is, doesn't matter. But let's look at the cost of it and let's budget for it. Another tip that I would pass along is that you don't have to accept the full amount of the cost of attendance all at once. So what I mean by that is you can request all but $2,500, let's say. Well, that $2,500 in eligibility, that doesn't go anywhere. That stays available to you for that entire academic year. So you can come back later on and request that additional money if it turns out you need it later on. So I try to encourage my students, let's put pencil to paper, let's do the math and see how much we project that you're going to need. If it turns out we shot too low and you run out of money sooner than we projected, you still can activate that loan request later on. But I went back to look at the percentage of our students who take all the way up to their cost of attendance, and it's just shy of 11%. So we really don't have very many students who need everything. And certainly if they need it, I'm not going to stand in their way. If they need it, and it's there for them. But what my goal is, and Mike mentioned this as well, we don't want students just signing up for, okay, I need the full cost of attendance because this is what the school's telling me I need. The cost of attendance is really sort of a starting place. But the individual answer is not going to be the same for everyone. So my advice would be, don't make assumptions. Go in and talk to someone in the financial aid office, and they will help you get to the answer that's right for you.
Yeah. I think a common question I hear from time to time from prospective students is, can I work a little bit during medical school? And I think you can. I know some of our students work little side hustles from time to time as like MCAT tutors for some undergrads on campus, or I've seen some students work part-time in the library that we have. Somebody brought up the other day, like, what if I did like Rover, that dog walking service? It's very flexible, and Mike, what's your advice? Do you have students that work from time to time? A little extra pocket money?
I'd say in the preclinical year, our preclinical time is a year and a half. So during that year and a half, there is a lot of open time that students can work. And they do, and I don't have the numbers on how many people actually do work, but I think if it's something that you enjoy doing, if we're luckily tied to a major research institution with the health system, so a lot of our students try to get some research opportunities within a lab with some of our faculty members that maybe they're on a grant and they can get a stipend while they're helping with some of their research. But I would say that if it's important to you and it's something you enjoy doing, you can certainly do that. I don't think many students do it. It's certainly not required, obviously. That first year and a half is probably when you can do it, because when you're in the clinics, your hours are going to be aren't going to be very flexible.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have the time during those years. But I think it's something that everyone should at least maybe try. Something that's local, or if there's a babysitting opportunity and you have time to really take it into what an average day looks like for you, and at least give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, that's okay.
Right.
But you want to at least maybe attempt it if you're willing, but making sure that academically you feel comfortable. You have to make sure that you feel comfortable taking on added responsibility, because no one, at least the faculty and staff here, we don't assume that you'll be working at all. We want medical school to be your full-time job. Yep. And so most of our students do not work, but they can if they want. And it's worth a try, but you don't have to.
Christine, anything to add to that? I mean, do you have students come to you and say, "Hey, is it okay? What are your thoughts on if I do a little side job somewhere?"
Yeah, so we do have students who do it. Usually, it's not like an hourly kind of job at a restaurant with structured times. It's more of a where you sort of drive your own work hours. So something like the dog walking or the babysitting. We see a lot of that. We do have a paid tutor program. So some of our students are paid through the College of Medicine to tutor some of the preclinical students on, just the exams and things that they have coming up. So some people do that. I kind of separate myself from the question of whether or not this particular student should work, because I know that my Associate Dean for Student Life wants to be involved if it's maybe an at-risk student who's thinking about picking up some hours. So I would first direct them to meet with her and kind of get her input. But and then if they have the all clear from her and they just kind of want my advice, what I would look at is making sure that they understand this is going to be pocket money. You're not going to be able to work enough hours to earn enough to pay your rent. So it's going to help, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be a game changer. They're not going to make enough money to pay the big ticket items in their budget.
Right.
Yeah, I think sometimes students think that they see a curriculum like ours is they're in class from 8 to noon and I have all this time in the afternoons and evenings, but you're going to work hard outside of the classroom.
Absolutely.
So you have to be a really good time manager to get your work done and then to make time for yourself to do those things that are important to you. But it's a lot of work. Med school's hard.
Yeah, no doubt.
I want to talk a little bit about, I want to get into a little bit about loans and then everybody's favorite topic, scholarships. So, because that's what people want to know about scholarships and how that works. But quickly though, Christine, let's talk a little bit about loans. What are the different kind of loans that are available? Why are federal loans maybe a little better than private loans?
Okay, so federal loans are specifically for students who are pursuing a specific degree. So they are educational loans. So a guy off the street could not walk into my office and borrow a Stafford loan, for example. So you have to be in a degree granting program. The interest rates are set federally. They are one of the only loans in the country that I'm aware of where your credit history is really not tied to the interest rate that you get. Now I'm talking specifically about the direct unsubsidized loan. We'll talk about the Graduate Plus loan in a minute. But as long as you're enrolled in a qualifying program, you get access to that loan money. So it's kind of an anomaly if you compare it to loans from a bank, which are very much tied to the stronger your credit score, the better, interest rate and fees and things like that you're going to get. Now, as a practical matter, why federal student loans are so preferable is because the whole program is kind of built around the fact that you are a student. So while you're working on your degree, your loans are deferred. You do not have to go into repayment on those loans while you're a student. And then shortly thereafter, once you graduate, you get 6 months of a grace period before you have to go into repayment. And even then, once you're in repayment, you have a lot more options. You have a lot more perks because this loan is specifically for students and it's federally guaranteed. So to give you an example, if you were to become physically disabled, so permanently and totally disabled, your student loans can be completely forgiven. So if you go through medical school and then while you're in residency, you encounter a terrible accident which leaves you completely and totally disabled, your student loans, there's no cap on how much can be forgiven. You can fill out an application, document what happened, and have your entire federal student loan profile wiped clean. That is completely unheard of with a car loan or a mortgage. So the federal loans really kind of play by their own rules, and they're very much centered on the fact that these are students undergoing this academic pursuit, and so you sort of get this specialized set of rules that govern these loan programs. So sometimes students come to me with private loan offers that they found, and I always look at them. I look through those offers with the student, and we arrive at an answer together. Now, just so the listeners understand, you can't get both. You can't get all of your federal loans up to cost of attendance and then also get private loans in addition to that. It's really one or the other. Mm-hmm. So we do every once in a while have a student, usually this would be a non-traditional student who maybe was out in the workforce for a while and really had that time to build up a phenomenal credit score, and they get an offer at an interest rate a fraction of what they get from the federal government. So what I do with that student is we sit down, we compare them. I'm very much a proponent of looking at the financial pros and cons. And what I mean by that is if a student's seriously considering taking private loans over federal loans, my first question to that student is going to be, what's going on in your personal life? Are you married? Do you have a family? Because we have to think about them too in making this decision. Because if you're considering taking a private loan, you're giving up a lot of federal protections. So if that impacts just the student, that's one conversation. But if there's a spouse and children involved, that conversation just got a lot more complex. So the take-home message, what I would like students to understand is people like Mike and people like me, we don't have any financial stake in how you decide to go with that. And that's a huge service to you, the student, because I'm not going to be trying to talk you into, taking a loan from this bank over that bank because I have skin in the game. I'm going to try to walk you through what's going to be the best for you. And that's really a very empowering place to be. So that's why I just so encourage students, no matter where you enroll for medical school, get to know your financial aid office and the staff people in it, because they can really help you out enormously.
You mentioned something about Grad Plus loans. What's that?
Yeah. So the federal unsubsidized direct loan, it's a great loan program, but we're subject to an annual cap. So no matter what medical school you go to, you're not going to get more than $40,500 from the direct unsubsidized loan program for your first year of medical school. So my cost of attendance here, Mike's cost of attendance at Penn exceed that number. So what do you do with this to cover that shortfall? That's where the Graduate Plus loan program comes in. So the Graduate Plus loan program is also federal, so it has a lot of the protections and backstops that I mentioned a minute ago. But the fees and interest rate are higher, so we use that loan as sparingly as we can. But a huge benefit of it is there is no annual cap on it, and there is no aggregate cap on it. So, Christian, you had mentioned, we had talked about this before, do we ever hear from students, I can't afford medical school? And the Grad Plus loan is really the answer to that question. Yes, you can. The money will be there. It's just a matter of the mix of those resources. So with the Graduate Plus loan, it kind of fills the gap where the other loan programs stop. So one thing to know, you do have to pass a credit check to get a Graduate Plus loan. The good news is it is a very basic credit check. So they're not looking at things like debt to income ratio or things like that. They're truly looking for adverse credit. So what that means is, have you filed bankruptcy? Are you actively in default right now? If you can answer no to those two questions, it's likely that you're going to be approved for the Grad Plus loan. So it really is kind of the loan program that comes to save the day. It picks up the slack where the other loan programs leave off.
That's great info. Oh, that's so good. That nice way to explain everything. To move along a little bit about scholarships, this is the one that everybody wants to know about. Is like, how do I qualify for scholarship at your school, and how much money do you give? And and I think I want people to hear is that we all do things a little bit differently. There's not one way that we some schools say they don't give out what you might call merit scholarship. And I know, Mike, you're like, I don't like the word merit.
So I jokingly say on interview day that all you have to do is get accepted and you're a candidate, but for merit. But that's ultimately the case. I hate to use the term merit because every student admitted to Penn is meritorious. But ultimately, if you're admitted here, you're automatically considered for a merit scholarship. And we have a committee of faculty who meet and discuss and go through every applicant that ultimately are going to say, okay, these are our students that we'd like to offer a scholarship, merit-based, so it has nothing to do with the financial need of the household. And we're going to offer that award regardless, and we'll probably tell you that soon after you're accepted. There's another way to apply for scholarships here at Penn, and it's via the CSS profile. And the profile is an application through the College Board. I know Penn undergrad uses it. The law school here uses it. A lot of our competitors use the profile.
Yeah, a lot of private schools use that. Yeah.
Right. A lot. Right. And that is a way for myself and my other colleagues to then determine your financial need. And we determine financial need based off of the tax returns, W-2s of your parents. So when a student applies for need-based aid, they're completing the profile, but they're also submitting documentation of their, it's always the prior year. So if you plan to matriculate into medical school in 2020, back to complete the profile data and to submit your 2018 your tax returns. Mm-hmm. So the 1040 and the W-2, those are documentation that you're going to have to submit via the profile application. It'll go directly to the financial aid office at that particular school. And then based on what's called institutional methodology, because every school may have their own institutional methodology in order to determine what you're eligible for in a need-based aid scholarship. We're a very expensive school, so we are very fortunate to have a number of scholarships that were able to offset the tuition and fees for a number of our students and keep the debt here at Penn relatively low. But not everyone is not everyone will get a scholarship, but about 70% of our incoming class is receiving some scholarship when they enroll.
I think it's important to note too, they also have to do FAFSA. Like everybody has to do FAFSA, right? And in CSS profile, the best way I've heard it described is CSS profile is like FAFSA on steroids. You have to submit a lot of the additional financial information for CSS profile. And like I said, a lot of the private schools do require that. And then even undergrad private schools require a CSS profile. I want to switch over to Christine. Any slight differences at say that public institutions when their students are applying for aid and thinking about merit scholarship or hoping for merit scholarship or needs-based aid?
Yeah. So this conversation is great. I don't think I realized how different processes could be between medical schools. We do not use the CSS profile at all. So what we have our students do to be considered for need-based aid is when they're filling out their FAFSA. Now, as you may or may not know, everybody who's filling out the FAFSA who's going to medical school, the federal government is going to consider you independent, regardless of your age, regardless of your marital status. Even if you still live at home with your parents, you are considered an independent student. Now, having said that, when you file your FAFSA, there's a question on there that allows you to opt in to provide your parents' financial information. So we require that students opt into that question if they want to be in the running for need-based aid through our program. So we go entirely by that. We don't have any kind of secondary application at all. We do, certainly have all the information we've learned about that individual through the application and interview process. But as far as assessing financial need, it is truly based on how they fill out that FAFSA. And to do the awarding the most fairly as we possibly can, we actually don't have a human being touch that at all. It's an algorithm. We put your data into that and the need-based aid response comes out, and that's what you get. Now, we do have students who go through an appeal process. We sometimes have students with young families who have childcare costs and things like that. We would take, if they were asking for additional consideration, we handle those very much case by case. So that's the need portion of it. As far as the merit, it sounds pretty similar. We have a committee that makes those decisions. One thing that I would point out is all of the medical schools and all of the applicants are kind of going through the same process altogether. So what I mean by that is this time of year, you might start receiving scholarship offers, but you're not required to accept or decline or really do much of anything until, Christian, help me out. What
April
is that
30th.
date?
April
Okay,
30th.
so until April 30th, you can hold that scholarship offer at more than one school. And the schools know that, and that's kind of how this process plays out. But come April 30th, this frenzy of activity is going to be activated, because all on the same day, we're finding out of those offers we have floating out there, how many of them are going to be accepted. And then the next question being, of those offers that we recoup, we're going to make new offers to more students. So it can be, and I try to be very upfront and very transparent with our students who come to interview. It is very, very possible that you can interview in November and not find out you've gotten a scholarship until May. That is possible, and that does happen. It's not ideal, but just the nature of the process itself, that absolutely can happen.
Some schools will redeploy money that wasn't taken into other accepted students. So I think what I want students to hear is that the goal of this application process is to get into medical school, at least one, right? If you get multiple acceptance offers, that's a very luxurious position to be in, because then go through all their financial aid processes, as painful as it might be, go through all their financial aid processes, because then you have the position of being able to sit down then, let's say you get 3 offers, you can look at the financial aid packages for each of those med schools. And one might give you primarily all loans. The other one's giving you a little bit of scholarship and then loan combination. And then the other one's giving you a big, juicy scholarship. So then you can start to kind of think, what's a good academic fit for me? What's a good financial fit for me? And, we all have our own stories about this, how students have made decisions. And I've received the Dear John letters saying, it's not you, it's me, I'm going someplace else because, I already have a mountain of undergrad debt and I just can't take on, more loans. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But, but I think you got to be careful though, and not chasing just chasing the merit money. I mean, Christine, you told me a story. Tell me about a student you had it gotten to kind of, a situation because of that.
Yeah. So I had a young lady I got to know and became very fond of in her time here. And the reason I got to know her so well so early on in the cycle is because she was awarded one of the largest scholarships that we have. It was a scholarship set up by a former dean of ours in the name of his daughter who had recently passed away. So there was kind of that backstory to it as well. So this student, to her credit, really felt very responsible in accepting this scholarship, that she needed to do well and really to pay tribute to this young woman who passed away, and the scholarship was named for and all of that. Well, long story short, as I got to know this student better, I come to find out Ohio State was not her first choice. She had fallen in love with another school where she interviewed, and she got this scholarship offer from us. She got a smaller scholarship offer from this first choice school. And when she was kind of agonizing over this decision and included her parents in this decision, they kind of talked her into accepting our offer, really because of the scholarship. So they absolutely meant well. Nobody planned for what happened, but we weren't the right fit for her. So she wasn't very happy here. And unfortunately, she didn't do well academically, which I think, I know she had outstanding credentials coming in. So she had the ability, but it just wasn't the right fit. So what happened is she ultimately kind of became more and more depressed and isolated, and her academic performance slipped so far that she lost the scholarship. So after all is said and done, in trying to make the best decision from a financial perspective, she actually positioned herself to ultimately be unsuccessful. And it was really quite heartbreaking. She put a lot of pressure on herself, a lot of blame on herself. And there were no winners in this story. Yeah. So it's kind of a cautionary tale about scholarship is wonderful, but go to the school that really, gives you butterflies in your stomach, that school that is just the right fit for you. And scholarship can complicate that sometimes because it feels great to have a school show that they want you so bad that they're going to, make this offer to you. But kind of keep it in perspective. The scholarship is part of the answer. It's not the entire answer.
Yeah.
I really hope the best for this young lady, but she withdrew. So I have not spoken to her in quite a while.
I'm going to add a couple things. Oh, sorry, Christine.
I was just going to say, I don't know how that story ultimately ends.
I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear that. I mean, I think what I want to mention to listeners is that, one, you can't just readily transfer to another med school. Transfers are very uncommon, right, guys?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So while undergrads may be able to transfer from an institution to another institution, it's very difficult to do that in a medical school. So this is a big decision that people are making. And so Christine, I love your story because, like you said, it's a cautionary tale. And I said too earlier, you got to find the academic fit, and sometimes it's about the financial fit. But I mean, we all have our own stories. I've had students that have turned down big juicy scholarships someplace else to come here. And one guy said, I'm making an investment myself. I'm going to do med school one time. And I want to come to the place that I feel like I'm going to be happy and successful.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, and he knows and he's going to have loans, have to pay stuff off, but this is the one time he's doing this. So he's making an investment in himself. So we all have had these are tough decisions and you have a lot to weigh, but at the end of the day, you want to find a place where you think you're going to be happy. And 4 years is a long time to be grouchy. Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to think about the city. The city that you're going to be going to. If you're not a big city person going to medical school in Philadelphia, you have to think about that too. Are you going to be happy not only at the university, but think of the living arrangements. Think of the city you're going to be in, because you're going to be really involved in the community, and that's part of maybe a curriculum piece. Is a lot of it is getting out in the community that you're a student in. So if you want to go to school in a big city or in a small city, an urban area or rural area, that's all things to keep in mind. Because it's a 4-year commitment, and hopefully it doesn't come down to the dollar amount. But academically, the right fit, that should always be first.
Yeah. Hey, let's just kind of wind things down a little bit. Let's talk about, how do med schools then, when you get to us, how do we kind of help you out along the way when it comes to like financial wellness and resources? Mike, let's start with you. When people come to med school, what are some of the things students can expect to help them along the way in being financially fit?
Yeah, financial wellness is really a buzzword all all over our campus, not only here at the med school, but all over Penn. It's really important. Financial literacy is a really hot topic now, and it's extremely important. As a student, if you come to Penn, I mean, yes, if you're a student at Penn, we have the experts. I invite the experts here. We use Wharton graduates who have worked in finance and worked in investing. I have them come and speak to students here at Penn. We have like a debt managing strategist that will have individual appointments with students to kind of have a roadmap to know exactly what their repayment plan will look like. But I think everyone listening, they know the AAMC. They know AMCAS, which is the application service. But there's another acronym that I think is really important, and everyone, no matter where you end up in terms of medical school, can use the resources at the AAMC. And they have what's called FIRST, Financial Information, Resources, Services, and Tools. And the FIRST team within the AAMC has a ton of webinars and documents and all the tips and tools that no matter where you go to medical school, this is stuff that you can start using even today. And they have payment plans and what's the best option for deferment or forbearance, or what type of repayment plan should you go into. So the AAMC, I think, does a really good job. Every school has their own kind of resources too, but on top of that, the AAMC has really great resources that I know we take advantage of it here. Hopefully other schools, I'm sure, are taking advantage of it as well. But the debt, it's called the Education Debt Manager. And the Debt Manager is for any graduating medical student. And they also have a matriculating medical student manager, I believe, that kind of gives you a sense of, okay, this is what the next 4 years are going to look like financially, and a lot of different scenarios that hopefully everyone will fall into a certain category that they could use this document throughout their time.
I'll put links to that. I'll put links to that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really, and not a lot of graduate students have the resources that the AAMC provides. If you're a law student, you don't have a backing from another entity like the AAMC. So it's all this really great free resources that are available to anybody.
Christine, what do you have to add to that? I mean, as far as financial wellness initiatives that you've seen nationally and maybe locally at your school?
Yeah, so we certainly use the resources available through FIRST. So it sounds like we're doing a lot of similar things as Penn. One thing that has been hugely impactful and was really not a lot of work to pull together at all is I have a designated liaison with student council. They determine who that person is by whatever process they have. But I have a standing meeting with this person on student council, so I have that, I'm plugged into what they have going on. And they tell me what they want to learn more about, what kind of speakers they want me to bring in. So that has been a hugely helpful and beneficial relationship. Another thing that kind of surprised me and I was happy to have is our OSU College of Medicine Scholarship Committee actually allocated me a little budget for wellness grants, specifically financial wellness grants. So what that means is if I bring in a speaker to talk about budgeting, if you come to this session, it's voluntary. You don't have to be there, but you can actually get your name in this drawing for a financial award.
Cool.
And so that's huge because that really incentivizes people to prioritize this, to reach out for this information and to be engaged. So the committee's decision was, okay, this is an opportunity where for not a lot of money, we can have a really big impact. And it's blown me away. I've never had 200 students show up to an optional lunchtime budgeting session.
Yes.
And I didn't even provide food.
No food.
It was a brown bag, bring your own lunch, and I still had 200 people come.
Oh, that's a win.
That is definitely
incredible. And that's one of the things I love about being here at OSU, at College of Medicine, is this message of wellness really goes from the top down. Everybody is showing that this is important here and are really putting their money where their mouth is. So it's been a great partnership, and I plan to keep doing it.
I think it's worth mentioning to listeners to know that medical schools have requirements by our accreditation bodies that we have to provide debt management and financial literacy programs to students. So we're required to have some programming. And so all med schools should be doing some literacy, wellness activities and things. And like Christine said, a lot of them are optional, but gosh, you should go to these things because it's a way for them to have a curriculum and help you kind of manage things along as they kind of move you through those years of med school. And I wrote down a note that I think, Christine, you said, when we were having a planning meeting about this, was don't have shame about this, right?
Right, absolutely. So, and I think specifically what I told you, Christian, was I am not in healthcare. I'm not trained in that, and that is not my profession. So when I need to go in for, let's say, a throat swab, my doctor's not going to stand there and say, well, why can't you do that yourself? You should already know how to do this yourself. Why are you coming to me? And the same thing is true in the reverse. So I don't have any preconceived ideas of what you, the medical student, should already know about finances and loans and interest rates and, calculating the value of one scholarship offer compared to another. I don't think you should already know how to do that because that is not your career path. That's not what you're going into. So seek out the help of people who this is what we do. We help medical students figure out how they're going to pay for medical school and how to position themselves to be financially well as they transition into practice. So absolutely have no shame whatsoever. I have heard I want to say he was the second or third ranked student in the entire Med 4 class last year, asked me, can you explain how interest works? I've never taken out a loan. And it's true. He was so successful as a student. He had scholarship his entire life up until this point. He was a Columbus native. He really didn't need a car. He didn't have a car loan. So he had never taken out an interest-bearing loan until his fourth year of medical school. And we sat down and went through it, and he got it. And, and that's okay. You do not have to be ashamed about asking those foundational questions like that. And that's why we're here.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mike,
exactly.
Before we wrap it up, Mike, any kind of final thoughts? Anything you want to add?
I know financial aid isn't the most fun topic, but it can be, I guess.
Anything fun?
Yeah, I mean, we wherever you go, hopefully the financial aid folks are enthusiastic and fun to talk to because we're trying to make this ever-changing career that we have in financial aid. We all want to be here. We all want to help you as best we can. And, I don't know if you're leaving emails tied to this podcast, but, I'm happy to talk with the student if they want to reach out to me and just say hi and we can talk about stuff. I mean, I'm happy to do that. And, I don't know, it's just, it's a leap of faith almost, right? Go to medical school. You want to have a career being a physician. Becoming a doctor, unfortunately, is an expensive endeavor, but there are resources and people out there all across the country that really want to help you and know that this may seem daunting and it may seem scary and it's not the most glamorous of topics, but for everyone listening, know that there's someone out there at whatever school you decide that is into this stuff, and they'll be more than happy to chat with you and help you through this process, because we all win in the end. As kind of nerdy as that sounds, we all win in the end when we have students graduate with a little bit less debt and more financial wellness.
Yeah.
So we just are here to help and know that there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
And we're just waiting for that email, waiting for that phone call, and we'll be happy to chat.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like what you said, Mike, we've been talking about some heavy stuff here, loans and cost of attendance and big money and numbers and stuff. But I want to leave the listeners with one thing, just to know a couple things about what the future can look like financially. And I know a lot of these students going into medicine aren't doing it for money, and it's about the reward of taking care of patients and helping people and really furthering, their own knowledge and things. But you, as a physician, could have a modest living. I mean, I pulled up some data from the AAMC's financial report from 2018, and in 2018, the mean salary for a pediatrician was $292,000. A family physician who was a full professor, the mean salary was $240,000. Among the top earning specialties were neurosurgery, thoracic and cardiovascular surgery, and Mohs surgery for full professors. And that means they're kind of like really into their career, because to get full professor, it's a big promotion, but that's kind of down the road in your career. But as a full professor, it was $754,000 for neurosurgery, $784,000 for cardiothoracic surgery, and $853,000 for Mohs surgery. And those are the means. So, I mean, that's big salaries. And this is down the road as a career. But if you're going to be a physician for the next 35 or 40 years, and if you are doing the right things now and you practicing budgeting, and then eventually talking to financial aid people as a medical student, and then working with a financial planner or advisor as a physician down the road and making good financial decisions, you will pay off this debt. You will become, financially fit and be able to make some, have a modest living down the road. And that's kind of what I wanted to leave people with. So I've really valued the input that you guys have brought today. It's been, I knew I was getting two pros on this call.
Yeah,
and it's been, I've been hanging on your every word when you've been talking. So thanks so much for doing this with me today, guys. Christine and Mike, I really appreciate it. And I look forward to thanking you in person next time I see both of you.
Yeah, I think I'll be in Cleveland in May, so
I'll see you then.
We'll get together soon.
And Christine, you're from Cleveland, so.
I am, yes. So I have a great fondness for Cleveland. My parents still live there, so I head up there as often as I can, and sometimes I'm able to catch you and your dean for lunch, and that's always a great thing when it works out. So, I don't know if you guys are getting any snow yet. We're just getting a lot of sloppy rain down here.
It's sunny and 75 up here right now, so it's.
Oh, you liar!
Listen, guys, I'm going to let you go. I've taken up a lot of your time today, but it's been uniquely informative. So thanks so much. I'll see you around. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.